Basically, today's discussion is restoring, managing ecosystem at local level for self-reliance and regenerative development. To go ahead with this discussion today, we have to understand the four key words involved in this process. First one is the restoring, second one is the managing, then the self-reliance and regenerative development. When we're talking about the restoration, it is basically an action for regaining something to its former conditions. It is basically ecological restoration, the process for repairing a site with the ecological processes, basically managing the different biological communities and ecosystem. The image here, the condition before a restoration of a particular place where the wetlands were there, which is totally degraded. Over the period of time, with the effort of restoration, the natural ecosystem of the wetland is revived. This is a process. In this particular site, it takes around 15 years to get a particular state. Now, in this restoration process, there are very critical approaches. Is that what are the species, what are the approaches you are going to adopt for the purpose? That perspective, one important thing is that, for example, yesterday, all over the world, there are lots of plantations. But what species, what plant sampling you planted in a particular ecosystem? The selection of species, selection of a particular plant sampling is very critical to the ecosystem. What you will plant in which places? In an ecosystem like wetland where the water bodies is there, you are doing, if you are planting some alien species, it will destroy the entire ecosystem. So these are the very critical aspects of the ecological restoration, how you select a particular species or the different structural approach to revive an ecosystem, which is very much important in our context because we have lots of local level ecosystem or ecological assets. Second important key points or the key word is the management. It's a process dealing with the situation or context with a functional system of management. And ecosystem management basically a process which follows the principles of ecological conservation in the basis of the ecological function or the ecosystem functions. So from our perspective, ecosystem management basically start with developing a new thought process which requires a new approach, and basically changing of the mindset is important. Then come the initiative for care, initiative for care of all living being, including the fellow human being. Then it is a questions of reduce our consumption level. Probably we have a great learning in this COVID-19 pandemic, particularly in the lockdown period. There are many products which is not available where there is no supply. We avoid it and able to live happily without that, which indicate there are many things we consume in day-to-day life. It may not be that essential. So basically, reduce means how we can able to reduce not essential product or the other things. Similarly, the refuse is another concept. The how you can able to uh, refuse the different materials which is not required from the perspective. Then the reuse is reuse of the different product in different way. There are many ways to do that. Then the last one is the approach of coexistence. Coexistence with the nature is an important thing. Coexistence basically involve the concept of social inclusion also. In a society, how we will coexist with the all class of people and all living beings. That are the important issues for the concerns. When we are talking about the self-reliance, it is basically removing or reducing the dependency on others, self-sufficiency, enough resources to fulfill our need to attain the well-being. Basically, self-reliance starts with the proper management and revival of ecosystem, which is linked with our production system, which is again linked with our settlement and livelihood security, which ensure the food and health security. This cycle, when completed, but from all these sources, there is a contributions to our well-being, then we get the self-reliance. From that perspective, uh, this COVID-19 pandemic was just a trial in the world in coming days. Lots of this kind of crisis we may going to face. In that context, how that self-reliance can be achieved at our local context, at the village level, at the ward level, are very much important. From that perspective, we have to look into the ecosystem we have, our production systems, and the settlement and habitat how what we design for the purpose. Regenerative development. It's a very contemporary concept of development. We have a buzzword of sustainable development, but now there is a uh, review, critical thought on the sustainable development process, because sustaining is not ultimate goal. If from the ecological point of view, if there is a continuous regeneration of the natural asset, natural resources, ecosystem functions, then and then only our well-being can be fulfilled. From that perspective, it's a new approach which demand for ecosystem approach in designing development on the basis of the cyclical economic principles and ecosystem of production, distribution, and consumption with zero waste. It basically related to the two major components. One is regeneration of nature-based resource support system and cyclical economic principles. There is an image of a small earthen pot with the coriander. Probably you have seen in the skin. Just imagine you are cultivating some coriander plant in an earthen pot. In the case of harvesting, you have two options. One, you can just remove out the coriander plant from the earthen pot and have it. Another is you just plug the leaf what you request from the plant, that pot, not remove the plant. Now what happened, we had done this experiments. After 5 to 6 days, again from same plant you collected the leaf, it started to grow and give you the leaf. This is just an example of the regenerative natural resource support system. How you harvest it, collect it, that is one of the factors. Second important thing is the circular economic based principles. I'm just citing one example. Suppose we are cultivating the pineapple. So what is the value chain of the product which ultimately reduce the waste, or we can achieve the zero waste? You just imagine from the fruits we can go for making juice. After juice making, whatever the pulp there, that can be used for the jam making. After the jam making, whatever the product there, we can go for the candy. Even the after that, whatever the remain, you can uh, make vinegar out of it, wine even, and the peel, whatever remain, if it is properly dried and converted into powder, it gives the pineapple tea, which is a very popular tea. The 50 grams cost around 125 rupees. In Amazon, if you search, you will get it. And from the pineapple fiber, we can able to extract from the leaf fiber, and which is used for the different kind of textile products. And ultimately, in all this process, whatever the waste remain, that can be fermented properly, and that solutions give a booster for the soil. Now, just imagine from one cultivation or one product, there is no waste at all. Everything can be utilized properly, so that this is called the resource efficiency or resource use properly. And this is the time, if we go for the proper concept to reduce our consumption on nature and utilize the resources properly, which ultimately link to self-reliance at the local level. So from that perspective, cyclical economic approach is very much important to our context. Now, how to go about for this purpose? The basic uh, core approach is the conservation livelihood. Conservation livelihood is an approach which basically link conservation and livelihood together. If you conserve something or utilize it in a wiser way, it will give you the livelihood security. The entire process is with a perspective of growth within. Growth within means the ultimate development within an ecosystem level. That may be a village, that may be a watershed area, that may be a river basin area, in the process of circular economy and valuing the indivisible. This is very important in the conservation livelihood and circular economy, how you value the invisible. For example, normal economic development program or the normal economists never talk about what is the role of a coriander plant in the economy, what is the role of a pineapple in the economy. But these are the invisible resources which is neglected by the economic processes, but it has lots of potentiality if we go for the tapping the natural capital proper way, reducing our carbon footprint. Then come important things in this conservation livelihood is connecting nature, culture, and development. What is the natural capital, ecological base you have in your locations, in your local context? What are the cultural practices you have? Because cultural practices has a ecological ethics and ethos. That's why many kind of practices, even if you look to the textile design of different community of Assam, different dance from everywhere, this is mimicking nature. The Bagrumba dance, this is a mimicry of the butterfly. Sometimes, therefore, it is called as a butterfly dance. Similarly, for the there are many examples. Probably support graph in and around there are lots of Boro students. So for the Boro people, peacock motif is a important motif, which is very sacred motif in their textile design. How it comes? The Western Assam up to Mana National Park, this is the normal natural distribution of peacock in this part of Asia, beyond which there is no existence of peacock. So people living in this area always observe it, and this is a very sacred bird for them. And obviously that is coming to their textile design as a sacred. Therefore, this is used for this kind of textile design motif products are used occasionally on the marriage, on different kind of rituals, not in day-to-day life. These are the just an example how the culture have a nature oriented ethos and ethics that need to be considered, that need to be followed when we go for the developmental planning. The any developmental activities which are targeted for the well-being of people, it must cater the nature and the cultural practices people have in a particular situations. Another thing is that all this conservation livelihood program need to empower the community. Community empowerment is a very important issue because uh, from the colonial period, from the uh, Newtonian science, the Keynesian economy give us an idea that as much resource you consume, you will develop. That is a wrong concept, which is proved, and every one of us is experienced now. From that perspective, community need to be empowered. They have to be rescued from that thought process. For that purpose, there is a need for very systematic community awareness education process. At the same time, skilling is very much important. If we go for the cyclical economic based approaches, so skill development of the community is important, and it must follow the eco-cultural ethics and ethos of the people. There are some of the other additional requirements. If we go for the other aspects of the conservation livelihood or the cyclical economy, some of the important aspects need to consider what is the traditional knowledge system we have. Within the traditional knowledge system, we have two important knowledge systems. One is the traditional ecological knowledge, another is traditional technical knowledge. So very recently, regarding the traditional ecological knowledge, one student from the Delhi School of Economics, who belongs to Assam during this COVID-19 lockdown period, she has conducted a study in the Kohara River basin among the Karbi villagers, particularly Karbi women. She identified all these Karbi women collected 21 different wild vegetable from the forest, what they have in home during the lockdown period, and they also sell it to the neighboring plains villages. So this is the richness of the traditional ecological knowledge, how you identify what is edible, which is not edible, which are non-cultivated product, what can be used for medicine, food. All these things are part of the traditional ecological knowledge. And traditional technical knowledge, you just imagine the fulcrum you use for the tilling of the soil, how it is designed, our traditional housing, different kind of bamboo bridge we construct. All these are different part of traditional technological knowledge we have. So how that can be used, because this traditional technological knowledge are eco-friendly, it does not require more energy to run, how that can be modified to develop a appropriate technology. Second important thing is natural farming. If we look into our traditional agricultural practices, it is very much natural farming. It's just because in a rural context, our kitchen waste, it is linked to our cow shed, linked to our agricultural field. Nothing is basically wasted at all. So these are the process of the natural farming. I'm not talking about the organic farming, because organic farming in the present days, it is a capitalist construct. There is a capitalism involved in the organic farming. You have to go for organic certifications and many other formalities, without which you cannot sell your product as per the rule. But traditionally, what we are doing is natural farming. How that can be scientifically improved? That does not mean you have to go for the high yielding varieties or the power tiller or the tractors. But there are other means to do that. Then come the eco-cultural ethos and ethics I discussed already. Then come the alternative appropriate technology. Uh, it means we have a traditional technology, how efficiency of that technology can be enhanced so that it can be used properly. Say, for example, if you take the example of a nangol, it's a symbol of self-reliance. How nangol is developed and designed at local context by the villagers. It is not manufactured elsewhere. The raw material to produce a nangal, it is available within the village. If a farmer faces the trouble with using that nangal, he can repair it himself. But if this is the best example of the decentralized system of the alternative appropriate technology, if nangal can be efficiently transferred to a tiller, which is manually operated, without even using a pair of bullock cart, which cost around 30 to 40,000 and present market days. So that will be the dream of the appropriate technology. There are lots of uh, innovations going place. But if you take the power tiller or a tractor, this is a supply chain system. It is designed and developed elsewhere. It is supplied to you, and when to run that, again the farmer has to procure the diesel, which is also supplied from elsewhere, not locally available. So it increases the dependency. On the other hand, when farmer using it, if they face any trouble to repair that, not a person is available within the village who can repair a power tiller or tractor. Someone has to come from outside to do that services. It increases the dependency on supply chain on outside. So alternative appropriate technology is an approach through which one can go for the self-reliance at the local level. Then come the value addition chain. Most of the cases in village context, we produce many things from agriculture or from managing our natural capital. But if you look into it, there is no value addition at the local context. As a result of which the benefit reduces to farmers and the villagers. How that can be increases? Reuse and recycling principles in the value addition is another important thing. And then come the fair trade of the community product through community-based business. This is a very important thing. We always think the business will start by some capitalist. Our business will be helped by the government. But business can be run by the community themselves. I can cite an example. In Dhubri district, there is a uh, Sanghamitra Cooperative Society Limited. This is developed by 2000 women of Dhubri district. They are from 5 development blocks and they are doing lots of individual level business with the help of this cooperative. I'm just citing, and this is an example. In the history of the higher education of Assam, there is a huge, there is a very interesting, bright example of how cooperative or the community-based business can contribute to higher education. The best example is Jagirut College. Jagirut College is basically developed by the contribution of the Sita Jokhala Dairy Cooperative. At the time of Jagirut College foundations, there are 420 farmers family have the shareholder of that cooperative. And from every liter sale of the milk, 25 paisa is contributed to Jagirut College constructions and development. So this is the beauty that when community business start, community business profit can be shared for the community development. And that's why when we are talking about the self-reliance, eco-democracy, in that context, community-based business process is very much important, and cooperative can be one of the approach. In many cases nowadays, we cite the example of Kerala. Why Kerala is becoming a model? Because in 70s, when the cooperative movements are there in the country and nationally, uh, cooperative movements are successfully implemented in Kerala, and Kerala has lots of different cooperative model of community business. Even the Kerala has a community-based hospital, means community-based business of private hospital also. Then another important thing is a knowledge partnership. Knowledge partnership is that the common villages have their own limitations in many cases. So how that can be overcome through a knowledge partnerships with the knowledge holders. Basically, all the local level educational institutions, research organizations can able to make a partnership with the villagers and provide the knowledge, try to reduce the knowledge gap among the villagers so that they can go properly. Now, I'm happy to see, I have visited the Support Group College website. They have a committee where they have an approach for natural farming, nature conservations, and working with village approaches. So if this kind of things are properly, meticulously implemented, every college can help the cluster of villages in their surrounding with the knowledge they have. Even the student can contribute extension education in a different way. So one cannot deny this knowledge partnership is an important approach which can help us to, if we go for the local level ecosystems, we have the neighborhood forest, village forest, sacred forest. Say, for example, in Mahamaya temple, in and around the temple, whatever the forest there, this is considered as a very much sacred. Bamboo groves, it may be at the village level, individual or the community-based things are there. Stream, river, along with the riparian zone. I have seen in the Google Earth, in front of Sapotgram College, there is a stream or a small river. So these are the very important uh, assets for us, how to nurture that, how to get it, and particularly the riparian zone, means the river bank, a bank of the river, is a very vital ecosystem because it is transition between the terrestrial and the aquatic ecosystem. Lots of diverse resources, living beings are there that can contribute differently, maintaining the quality of water and contributing different resources to us. Then the agricultural field we have, uh, then the zoom plot in case of hill areas, and the homestead agroforestry or homestead garden, what we call in Assam is bari. It's a very neglected resources of Assam. Out of the total geographical area of Assam, 26% is represented by our homestead garden or bari. In case of Dhubri district, it is around 18% of the total geographical area of Dhubri is represented by homestead garden. It's a very vital ecosystem, agroforestry system we have, which has lots of different kind of utility and ecological functions. But we never look into this asset from that perspective. Then the village common land, right from the our cremation ground, graveyard, to different kind of the religious places, land. All these are village common land. How in these areas also there are lots of natural assets we have. Then I'm just citing you one example in this photograph. This is a village called Sampuri Desa, just 28 kilometers from Haflong town. It's a Dimasa village. You see, this village is surrounded by forest. But in many cases, the Dimasa is associated with the forest, and many communities of Assam has similar kind of approach. Dimasa community have a particular systems of land use in their villages. At the core areas, the settlement is there, which is surrounded by, they call it uh, Hadamsa, which is a small forest, which is surrounded by a fiding, which is a zoom plot. Then they have a Hagra, which is a mixed forest. Then their wet paddy areas, which is called as a Hadi. And the last one is a deep forest, which is Hagrama. Hagrama means big, deep. And another meaning of Hagrama is elder brother, means elderly brother forest. Now, if you just see a village have a ecological boundary with the deep forest. At the same time, it's a social buffer. It creates a separations from another village with the ecological assets. So in the process, everything is used in a different way. So traditional ecological knowledge of different communities. I'm just citing an example of Dimasa, but there are similar examples with the Rava, Boros, uh, missing, and everywhere. And this Dimasa community still preserve this six important variety of rice in their wet paddy and zoom cultivations, which are very much traditional, and some are short durational, some are long durational, some are aromatic also. So this is an example how the biodiversity can be conserved through a process of proper land use, which is traditionally designed by the community. This is an example from the Dihing Patkai region, what we are talking. This is a Karangkong, it's a Tangsa Naga village. So you see, in the mid, there is a agricultural field. In the side of it, they have a sacred forest and village forest. As a result of this existence of these two forests, water is absorbed properly, and this agricultural field get the water services at regular basis. So if there is a drought-like situation or delay in monsoon also, they can go for cultivations. This is the beauty how the forest and agriculture are linked for our villages. Similarly, if you look into the river, we see river near to our village, but river is a perennially connected to different spaces. So river is flowing from a hilltop and it comes to, so this river need to be conserved, not in front of the our village or in front of my house. It has to be taken care as a catchment area, as a basin area management. So similarly, all these river and streams provide lots of livelihood assets to the common villagers, particularly marginalized people. And they get lots of assets out of this river, not only for water for domestic use, agricultural use, they get lots of food and other materials also. Similar is the case for the wetlands. You see, the concept of forest, like the sacred forest, agroforestry, and irrigation. This is an example of the Karbi traditional irrigation system. At the hilltop, they have the sacred forest. In the mid of the slope, they have the agroforestry. In the downslope, they have the wet paddy cultivations. They carries the water through bamboo pipe, and this pipe is something different than the other pipe, because this is basically hole in the upside which help in the dropping the water, and it's an example of the drip irrigation. And at the end where their houses are there, ultimately water drained out, that water is used for the domestic purpose. Now it's a big land use practices of the Karbi community in designing their village system, which ultimately help to get water security and ecological security together, along with the food security from their agroforestry and agricultural systems. So these are the very interesting traditional knowledge-based ecosystem managements which need to be promoted and take care to preserve it. And this is again an example from the Dihing Patkai region. This village is called Pansung. It's a habitat of Singpho community. Uh, so at one look, this is a simple agricultural field. But if you understand what is there in this agricultural field, and their agricultural field has a particular slope pattern. With the variation of slope, the water holding capacity of the areas changes. So ultimately, in this agricultural field, they are producing around 11 different variety of rices. There are some rices which is requires less water, which is cultivated in the higher slope where water level is less. And in the down slope where water level is more, they cultivate the water loving rices. So this is a very important approach of ecosystem approach of productions. How with relations to ecosystem you are utilizing it for your production systems. So in all cases, these are the very important use or practices we have. uh, Similarly, as I say, the homestead garden or bari we have, it is a very ecologically rich areas. There are different example. You just see here, this is a structural example of a homestead garden or the bari we have. It is like a multi-storied production system. Minimum 4 layers on the top of the soil, and there is another layer in the underground level where the roots and tubers are there, which is cultivatable, edible, and which is a very useful, like the taros, different varieties of potatoes, etc. So it's a multi-storied production system. The homestead garden or the bari where the bamboo is there will get around 7 stories of visitations. Basically, 7 stories of uh, productions. And at the same time, there are lots of biodiversity. It supports to lots of insects, birds, and other animals. So it's a very resourceful asset for us. But ironically, we are not giving the more focus on this particular assets, how to nurture it, how to go for cultivations and managements. Now, question is the how to go about this. The entire process is basically you have to go for a connecting a eco democracy. Eco democracy is possible at the end level. At the bottom level, you have the grower, farmer, or NTFP collector, means the very marginalized people who collected different non-cultivated product, consume or sell in the market. So they are the basically founder or the who creates the foundation of the our ecosystem approach of economy. And there may be a link of the raw material collector who collect it, and it comes to a village cluster level semi-processing unit, and ultimately final products are produced and packaged, which is go for the promotional and communication and marketing, so that one way material will flow and another way it is the benefits are coming up or information is coming up. So this is the right way on the village cluster level, or the at the panchayat or the below panchayat level. This kind of um, eco-democratic structures need to be developed, linking the all. There is a very interesting example. Uh, Probably all the districts of Assam, everywhere, there are some supari industry where the betel nut is converted to supari. So I have a very interesting study way back in 2006, a supari cluster of Nagaon district. The, a supari industry which produce 10 quintals of supari per day. They engage around 20 to 30 natural resource collector, means the individual who goes to village, collect the raw betel nut and give it to the industry, and they get the commission out of it. And such industry requires around 100 to 120 manual labor who cut the betel nut into two parts, and it is dried. So this manual labor for them, how much betel nut per day they process, based on that they get the honorarium or the payment every day basis. For them, the knife or dao they are used, basically they use for the cutting of this betel nut is very important. For that purpose, in an interval of 2 to 3 months, every this labor goes to local blacksmith to sharpen this knife or the dao. Means if that industry is there, that amount of labor is there in that area, a blacksmith can also survive. Every year, a new knife or dao is procured by this labor. On the other hand, such a industry requires around 10,000 numbers of bamboo basket per year, around 2,000 numbers of bamboo mat per year. This is supplied by the neighborhood villagers who produce it at their home. And basically, these mats and bamboo baskets are produced by the women. And these families do not have own any bamboo of their own, because they don't have the bamboo grove. What they did, they collect this bamboo on payment basis from the uh, other people who have the bamboo. In the process, you just imagine uh, around 200 to 250 families can be supported by a small superi industry directly or indirectly. In a year, it turnover economic estimate is at that time it is 9 crores. 9 crores per year transaction by a 10 quintal per day production super industry in the surrounding villages. So this is a beautiful example of decentralized ecosystem based approach of rural industrializations, but without disturbing, because the industry like superi, it is not a technology intensive, not a energy intensive industrial process. It's a very labor intensive process which provides uh, employment or livelihood to the local people apart from agriculture. So similarly, if we uh, go for the what can be possible, superi apart from the superi, following the same model. Take the example of banana. So banana is there in every homestead garden. We basically consume the fruits. It is produced, many bananas are basically wasted because it is ripened together, lots of banana in one bunch. So banana can be at the raw level before ripening, can be used for the chips. Ripened banana can be go for the juice making. Whatever the raw material means the pulp remain, that can be converted to face marks. Rest can be dried and go for the bakery product like biscuit. Then the stamp of banana, uh, out of which fiber can be extracted, which can be support as a raw material to textile sectors. I don't know, way back in 1998, in Golokgons, there was a three women SSG who produced the banana fiber based craft. When I was in college, three women from those uh, groups we have invited to train our student at Nagaon Girls College at that time. I don't know how their business is now, but their extraction of fiber is very much manual, which can be used for uh, craft only. But nowadays there are different process of extracting fiber. Even the uh, community college of Assam Agriculture University, they have developed a new process of collecting fiber from the banana without wasting um, uh, 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 any raw material. So technology means technologies is available within Assam itself, how to collect the banana fiber for textile raw material. So that is there. Uh, Similarly, when we are talking about a plastic free, polythene free things, why not banana leaf can be converted to packaging material? It is very much possible if you visit different areas. Even if you visit Shillong, please visit the Delhi sweet shop in the police bazaar. They are using lots of banana leaf for packaging of their sweets and other products. Same thing can be possible in our context also. Then the taru, kosu. This taru is a very important high uh, uh, carbohydrate rich product which can be evaluated. When taru can be processed to powder, it can be used for the flour can be used for bakery product, like there are taru bread and biscuits and cakes are there. Taru can be used for the chips. You may ask me a question. So when we consume taro, there is a itching effect. Khuzwai. Because it is happened because of calcium oxalate crystal in the taro. That can be processed. The knowledge of processing what is required in higher secondary class 12 chemistry, the calcium oxalate titration practical. This is the one of the way how we can titrate, estimate the amount of taro, calcium oxalate in the taro, because with variety of taro it varies, and that can be neutralized in the lime water. So simply, it means our existing curriculum, particularly science education curriculum at the higher secondary level, it has a lots of possibilities to connect to the field, so that the educated youth can directly apply their skill and knowledge for different kind of rural development activities like the food processing and others. So, Taru, and for the farmers, there is no need to train them how to cultivate taru or kosu. And this kind of product does not require more fertilizer, more pesticide management. It is a basically natural farm product. And these are the example of valuing the invisibles. Ah, then the tapioca, himolu alu. I think in Dhubri it is called as Simla alu. And in many places in my childhood, in the rural areas, I have a experience to have boiled Simla aloo in the morning breakfast. So there can be value additions. The sagu, which is one of the item in our rituals or the in our fasting we have. The main source is this tapioca out of which this sagu is made. This tapioca can be converted to flour, which can that flour can be used for the different bakery product. Similarly, pumpkin. It is possible to produce different chips, pumpkin chips, the cracked nuts. Haldiram has a cracked nuts. 100 grams of this container costs around 120 rupees. This is nothing but the mixture of pumpkin seed and cucumber seeds. Similarly, the pumpkin can be converted to powder. It can be used for biscuit making and bake uh, cake and bread productions. And there is a pumpkin butter. We can extract the butter out of pumpkin, which is cholesterol free. And in many places, pumpkin is also used for wine making. You just imagine how much pumpkin is wasted, and the farmers not getting the proper price. And for pumpkin cultivation, farmers' knowledge is already available. It is not a very chemical intensive farming process. People can easily cultivate in natural farm product like pumpkin. So value addition is possible in such a level. Similarly, the bay leaf, tezpat. You plant a sampling in your homestead garden, it does not require lots of care. It will grow and survive. The leaf, which is harvested, we sell in the market as a bunch. One bunch is cost around 10 rupees. But if you properly plug it one to one, clean it, put in a packet, 100 leaves, you will get 10 rupees. From one bunch, what we sell now, we can produce minimum 5 packets with 100 leaves. Means instead of 10 rupees, we can earn the 50 rupees if properly this is packaged. And similarly, this leaf can be dried and converted to powder, which is very costly spices used in Southeast Asia, even in different parts of India. Then the seeds of the bay leaf is used for extracting a bay leaf oil, which is very costly edible oil, where the cholesterol content is very less and it is very healthy in the process. And similarly, I think in Western Assam, this is not a practice, but in Upper Assam, particularly among Ahom community, during the Bohag Bihu 7 days, you have to have red and egg, which is believed that it is very healthy. It save our health. That's a rituals. But all over Southeast Asia, even in Assam, we have a food habit. We use different kind of insect and this kind of microorganisms product as a food. Now, there are many countries like Philippines and others, they started in ant farming. Insect farming is nowadays considered all over the world as a climate smart agriculture system where the climate impact or the carbon footprint is very low. And these insects are the alternative protein source for future of human being. From that perspective, many countries now started the ant farming, a small ant box where you can rear your
and collect the egg. This egg can be consumed directly. You can produce omelette or that kind of things. And there are very costly oil. If oil for skin care is produced, which is called as a tela oil, which is basically from the ant egg. In Amazon now also you can place order for having that this tela oil for your skin. Now question is that why not we think for this? The department like zoology, when talking about the animal life, there is a need at this moment. We have to train our student about the insect farming, how to go for cricket farming or the ant farming, because these are the beautiful. It does not require a large space. In a small space you can cultivate and you can earn more than a goat or a cow. So these are the alternative approach, and many countries experimented. And the UN organization, the Food and Agriculture Organization, basically nowadays focus on the this insect farming. So so basically these are the ways how you can manage the ecosystems. And when we are talking about the natural farming, it requires lots of input for the soil health and managing the pest problem and etc. There are lots of solutions. Lots of homemade solutions are there. For example, before cooking your rice, when you wash your rice, the rice was water. If you can keep it, make sweet milk and jaggery, allow it for fermented. It is a great soil booster. It's a great soil booster which increases the soil health. Similarly, it's a fermentation process which is called as a indigenous microorganism process, through which we can go for getting lots of inputs for our agriculture, which are very natural. From the plant leaf, it can be from the fermented fruits, raw fruits, which like the banana, ripened papaya, mango, which are sweeter in taste. When it is very ripe and highly and becoming degraded, at that point of time, it can be fermented, and that fermented product can be used for the soil health and a plant booster. Similarly, fish waste, the fish scale or the fish, any kind of fish waste that can be converted to amino acid uh, content, rich amino acid is there. It can be fermented, it can provide the new kind of soil boosters. So there are lots of example of IMO, indigenous microorganism base. So in this context, actually what I want to say, if there is a will, there is a way. Means if we believe in the ecosystem approach, and if we believe in developing a eco democracy, so this is the time we have to think from the grassroots level, from the village level, the how the entire approach, because we have to make questions to the ongoing development process. It's a totally new process, I think, where all the higher educational institute take it ahead in a proper way. So for that purpose, we need the strategic planning based on the natural capital we have, mainly bioresources we have. Then the community mobilization, skilling, we need the skill workforce, technology facilitations, and community-owned business model. Because we cannot deny in a proper functioning, we have the economic well-being also. For that purpose, to control the economy at our hand is equally important to get self-reliance and ecological security and other well-being security. From that purpose, community-based business model is the ideal model which can control the entire process of governance and other approaches properly. From that perspective, this is a very important areas to look after. And I think the different colleges we have in Assam, they can play a very important role to orient their student connect to the neighborhood community, and mobilize the spirit for the eco-democracy, self-reliance through managing the ecosystems, uh, what we have in local context. So this is, in a nutshell, it's actually, this is a very big issues to discuss. I try my best to communicate. Thank you. There are lots of field-based or state-based examples are there. If you have any queries, I'm going to address those. Thank you.